All right, welcome back to the Homestand Show. We talked about a lot today. Not so much Blue Jay talk, but they won a series, Charms.
Yeah, that's
Finally.
something, I suppose, right? Yeah, hey,
First one
everything's moving in the
four.
right direction now.
Yeah, you would think.
we
Hopefully, everything
think.
will go the right way.
You know,
but it was
when
big.
things are positive, though, we have difficulty on this show.
I
You
know.
know, we're much better talking about negative things, I find.
That's what it's been like with the Leafs, the Jays. Maybe we got to start positive today. Let's bring in our next guest, Scott MacArthur, the host of the Exit Philosophy podcast with Richard Griffin. I have to say, before we even start, Scott, that flow, that hair is incredible, dude. That's like throwback to like WWF in the early 90s.
Right. Yeah. Well, but I want to be like technically clear. This is not a mullet. This is all one length, despite what it may look like on camera here. But this was a COVID thing. I'd never had long hair before. And so I just grew it out because all the salons and barbershops were closed. And then when they started to reopen, I'm like, you've come this far. You stop now? Like, why? So here we are. Three and a bit years later.
Let it go, man. It looks amazing. Okay, let's talk about the Jays, who don't look amazing. But like Sharm said, I mean, maybe it's best not to go negative. Let's start positive. The month of May wasn't great. I mean, they're 10-16 so far. They still got a couple games left to go.
Positive.
But if you're gonna, but hold on, I'm getting there, Sharms. If you were to pull some positives from the month of May, what would they be?
This is a G-rated podcast, so better turn my camera off while I do the reach around. So you said they were 10-16 in May so far, and I know that they were 2-13 against the American League East, which means, and this is always dangerous when you ask me, and not that you did, but when I try to do live math on the air, that means that they're 8-3 outside of the American League East. I found something. There you go. 8-3 against teams they don't play as much as teams they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well done.
There's the positive.
Oh, we'll take that. Yeah, listen, that's something to build on. Let's put it that way. Listen, okay, back to the negative. That's much more fun.
James.
Scotty, I mean, this team was supposed to be smarter this year, better defense, overall stronger mentally, or so we were told. Yet all these little mistakes creeping in the last few games in particular. What is the main issue to focus on here with this team?
Well, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on some of the more recent mistakes and suggest that it's because, I mean, Matt Chapman in Sunday's game in Minnesota, an unnecessary out, committed at third base. Griff and I even got into a discussion on the podcast episode that's going to drop later today about George Springer stealing second base in the first inning of Sunday's game. Now, this is a game they won, but I'm just going on a lot of recent stuff. And I said, you got a red hot Bo Bichette up right behind you. You can't be running into an out. And sure enough, Bo got a hit after George Springer was attempting to steal. I think a lot of this is veterans trying to do too much, and I think it is overcompensation for things that have unexpectedly gone wrong. So while he is a young player, young pitcher, I don't think anybody would have predicted the regression of Alek Manoah from top 3 in American League Cy Young voting in his first full big league season last year into the Jose Barrios 2022 level liability that he has become, where he is not just not pitching well, but he's also chewing up and spitting out your bullpen on a lot of his start days because he's not getting out of the 4th and 5th innings. I was okay, and in fact, more than okay with some of the offseason trades that they made. But like, let's be honest, Dalton Varsho has not hit to the level that they anticipated he would. Now, he is a left-handed hitter who traditionally has hit righties well and lefties not so well. He's not even hitting his strong side well so far this year. They've gotten not enough production out of the catcher's spot. There's been a significant regression out of Alejandro Kirk. And they've gotten nothing but a vacuous hole offensively at second base this year, except for when they let Whit Merrifield play there, which isn't often enough, as they try to find spots for Santiago Espinal and Kevin Biggio, who have done literally next to nothing, try to find those two guys playing time. So there's all of that. And then you throw in the clear issue of not enough depth. Why is their bench so bad? Well, who are the alternatives in Buffalo? There really aren't any. Why hasn't Alek Manoah been taken out of the starting rotation? Well, one, I wouldn't have done it yet anyway, but two, you answer your own question with another question. Who are you calling up from Buffalo to take his spot every fifth day while he goes and, quotes, works on himself? So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but we are only 1/3 of the way into the season. And as Griff discussed on our podcast, as I shamelessly plug in today's episode, the next third of the season, there's very little of the American League East. And so they've got to find a way to make up some ground playing teams outside the division.
Scott, you mentioned vets trying to do a bit too much. Could that be the case as to why we're seeing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. struggle mightily in the month of May?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's an interesting question because his numbers, we're focused on the home runs and maybe on the slug percentage, but this is a guy who's still got an OPS well above 800 for the season. And so it's a reminder of the bar and the expectations that Vladdy set for himself, particularly in that 2021 season where he hit 48 home runs. Now, he's got 8 home runs on the year, none at home. I say he's got 7 home runs on the season because the one he most recently hit in Tampa Bay was off a position player in that 20-1 blowout victory. They do need more power from him. But what I'm not so sure of right now, and only time is going to tell us this, is whether Vladdy is a 40-plus home run a year guy or whether that 2021 season was an outlier. Maybe he's a 25 to 30 home run guy. And I'm going to suggest that it's not necessarily trying to pick up the slack for others that is affecting Vladdy this year. I think he's right in that happy range where he's seeing guys his age or slightly older than him, but with the same amount of major league service time. Because remember, he was so young when he broke into the big leagues. He's looking around and he's seeing guys sign for more than $250 million on long-term contracts. And I would not be surprised if that has crept into the back of his mind. And he's thinking to himself, I've got to have statistical lines for this, and this that look like this, and this if I'm going to max out the type of money I want. And on the flip side of that, when you look at the type of year that Bo Bichette is having, I think you could argue, and he even alluded to this, not directly, but indirectly in spring training when he talked about how with fewer external distractions, it allows you to just really focus on your craft. I think you're seeing the type of year out of Bo Bichette because he's locked in through the rest of his arbitration eligibility, which is to the end of the 2025 season. He is not performing this year in anticipation of a potential arbitration fight with the Blue Jays next winter. He knows what he's making this year, next year, and the year after that. And so I think with these young kids, and Alek Manoah could be in the back of his mind too, although I think it's a little early for a long-term contract, even if he was still pitching like an ace. I think money and setting yourself up, and in Alek's case, because Vladdy's got his dad who made some coin, but setting yourself up for the rest of your life and generations beyond you for the rest of your life, I think that does creep into guys' mindsets.
That's interesting, Scott. But if you're John Schneider, how do you address that situation with Vladdy?
The money part?
Yeah, we're just getting him back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I really think, I don't think there's a lot to say. I think it's track record related here. Now, he's still hitting the ball hard. What he needs to not be is a guy who hits 110 mile per hour ground balls as often as seems to be the case. So I'm going to revert back to, well, I mean, heck, whether it's the old 76ers teams of a half decade ago or whatever, it's trust the process. But I mean, this is a guy who hits the piss out of the baseball a lot and who often does it with frozen ropes. And, you know, I've never been one to just obsess over launch angle and whatnot, but he's not getting underneath the ball enough. not driving it on that upward trajectory enough, and that's why he's hitting doubles instead of home runs. And I think he's gotten deep into his own head, and that's why he's beating balls while hitting them hard, beating balls into the turf for ground outs and stuff like that. I think the manager's talk is really more just look at your history, look at your numbers, look at your credentials, trust your process, continue to have good hard hit balls, and you will get those results. I really think it's encouragement at this point. It's not beating a guy down or not trying to make him press harder. Baseball does not go well for players when they try harder, because they often then end up trying stupider. You can't try your way into better results in baseball. It's not like if you're goalless in 15 games in the NHL and you go and throw a hard check in the corner and knock a guy down and separate his shoulder, you bring the bench to life type thing. It really doesn't work that way in baseball. So it's just about staying with the process and trying to work through the mental hurdles of not necessarily getting the results that you want on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I mean, as fans, as Jays fans, we're as fickle as they come. And Vladdy's not having a great year, but it's still a pretty good year so far. Bo's having an amazing year with the bat, but his glove's not quite good enough, for a shortstop. So there's always a reason to complain about something. You've covered this team for a very long time, Scotty. Not to age you, of course.
This ages me, James.
Yeah,
see the white in the beard there? Yeah.
Yeah, I got lots
Shows
of that
up
myself.
quick.
Get some here now as well, actually, I noticed. But where are you at right now with this team? It's a third away through the season, awful American League East. Where exactly are you as far as your levels of panic?
Well, my level of panic would be less if they, played in the American League Central, where they'd be pretty much with the Minnesota Twins at the top of the division. But joking aside, I mean, there are red flags here. They are a Kevin Gausman or Chris Bassett injury of some consequence away from being in significant trouble. Because I until I see a month's worth of consistency out of Alek Manoah, I am not going to buy into, he's coming off a good start, therefore he's back. Barrios has been a savior for them over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, he without him, Kikuchi's regressed, giving up too many home runs. So the Manoah thing is really a problem. So that's an issue. Matt Chapman hit 5 home runs in the first 2.5, 3 weeks of the season, which, has kind of helped paper over the fact that he has been pedestrian at best for the last 5 or 6 weeks. They are not a very long lineup right now, and they are not a very deep lineup as long as the Alejandro Kirks and Dalton Varshos of the world aren't hitting simply the league average. Like, guys go on hot streaks, and it's going to be very helpful if and when that happens with those guys. But I'm talking about consistently maintaining league average or slightly above. This team needs that out of those guys. They've got this gaping abyss at second base. They have been relatively fortunate with health to date. I know Danny Jansen just went on the IL with the groin, but outside of that, again, relatively healthy. So how do they deal with an injury bug if one hits, given, as we've discussed earlier, the lack of depth? I have my concerns. I believe that this lineup and this group, as a 26-man unit without terrible injuries hitting them, is good enough to make the playoffs. It's going to be really hard now, if not impossible, to win the division, just the way the Rays have gotten out of the gate, and the fact that the Orioles are now suddenly an excellent team. And, oh, by the way, there are more really good players coming. They still have the top-rated farm system in all of baseball per Baseball America. They're only going to get better. And you've got the Yankees, of course, and the Red Sox are right there as well. So this is going to be tough. They have put themselves in a tough position in a difficult division, but don't write them off yet. There's still more than 100 games left, 2/3 of the season to go.
Scott, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for doing it, man. We really appreciate it.
Happy to do it anytime, boys. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to chatting again.